Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
So what I love to do is help entrepreneurs meet where they are with crossing into biohacking. So if you go, well, what is biohacking? Well, if you break it down, what it sounds like, it's hacking your own biology. It's essentially using ideas to not only change your external environment, so think the temperature of the room, think the lighting in your evening, but also your internal environment, what you eat, how you sleep, how you move, so that you can have more longevity, so that your brain can work better, and that you can feel more energized in your body. But the way I do biohacking is a little bit differently, because how I differentiate that from just like regular health habits is everything must be measured.
You're listening to the Positively Living podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zawrotny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a coach certified in time and stress management, helping clients make space for what matters most in their lives. Join me each episode and we'll talk about decluttering, stress management, habits, personalized productivity, gratitude, and so much more. I understand the overwhelm of life because I'm a wife, mom to kids and cats, and a former caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. If you've ever felt distracted, unfocused, struggling to make decisions, easily distracted, wait, did I say distracted twice? Yeah, you're going to want to let this episode play. Confession time? Today's guest unintentionally called me out on quite a few things, and I consider myself productive, so this is definitely worth a listen for all of us. We unpack some really important details about brain function and sleep, because you know sleep had to be involved, right? You'll learn what biohacking is. I promise it's neither dangerous nor illegal, at least in the context of what we share. You'll come away from this episode with simple ways to adjust sleep, nutrition, and manage stress for optimum brain performance. We even bust a myth about making up sleep that I've wondered about for so long. My guest today is Tanessa Shears, a health consultant and host of the Becoming Limitless podcast. She helps entrepreneurs scale their business by optimizing their health, focus, and productivity with science and biohacking. She does this by optimizing the performance capacity of your body and brain so you can produce more meaningful, impactful work output and scale your business faster. While it's hard to pick a favorite of the tips Tanessa offered, the myth about making up sleep was at the top. I have to say I was delighted when she described a must-do for brain performance when it comes to stress. We need to create space to calm our brains, and that's exactly what I do as a coach. So, after you've listened and you're thinking, okay, Lisa, it's time to get more alpha waves going, you'll understand what I mean after you listen to the episode. Where am I going to put this in my schedule? Well, then it's time for us to talk. I welcome you to DM me on Instagram at positively_Lisa or book a free connection call at positivelyproductive.com/call. Welcome, Tanessa Shears, to the Positively Living podcast. I am so excited to dig into this topic today because I'm a huge fan of it and you. And I'm so thankful you're here. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Lisa. I love talking about all of these things. And I know we have sleep as a foundational love here. So we're going to get into all of the things today.
All the good things. But before we do, would you please tell us a bit about you, who you are and who you help and what makes you light up, what you just love to do?
Yeah. So my name is Tanessa. I am a mama and a business owner. I've got a 2-year-old right now, and I'm currently pregnant. I am a health consultant. So what I do is I work with entrepreneurs specifically. They are my people. And when entrepreneurs come to me, they're usually at that stage where they're waking up in the morning and they're just feeling really kind of foggy and they don't feel well rested. So they go into their day and they're kind of getting through the day. They're not really getting everything done they like. It's kind of getting pushed off. And then that energy crash happens around 2 p.m. And they're just like, oh, I just either have to grind this out or we just have to crash into the couch and have a nap. And they get to their evening, they usually zone out, some kind of social scrolling, TV. They don't really feel like they're getting the most out of their time. They don't, make time to exercise. They know that their food could use a little bit of improvement. So that is usually where entrepreneurs are when they come to me. And what I help them do using a fun tool called biohacking, I help them create a health routine that fits in with their business, that is focused on key fundamental areas that most entrepreneurs let slide to the wayside, because we often think that, it's either our health or our business. Like, how can you possibly balance both? And so what I do is I use wearable technology as well as, like I said, biohacking to help them integrate health habits that optimize how their brain works so that they wake up well rested, clear, and focused.
Yeah, well rested, clear, and focus. Yes, please. I will take that. I love that. And, we've connected on Instagram. We've been chatting for a while. I've followed what you do, and there's definitely a wonderful overlap with the conversation I had with Molly McLaughlin on the podcast all about sleep. So we're definitely bringing it up again because we need to come at these things from different angles. And one of the things that I love is this idea of biohacking and uncovering what it really is. Cause it sounds like, whenever you talk about life hacks, it almost sounds like you're
Cheating.
yes, I was about to say there's a phrase that I use that is kid friendly. It's called doing something by half. And the thing of it is that I am all about the good enough and I'm all about making it work. And it sounds like what you're talking about is a way to leverage the smallest amount to make it give you the biggest return. So I'd love if you would dig in a little bit about what this biohacking is and what it can do for us.
Yeah, well, don't go and Google it because
I
that will
know, right?
scare you.
I know.
The first time I heard biohacking, I was like, is this dangerous or illegal? Like, what are we hacking? I mean, I come from a background, I'm a kinesiologist by trade. I went to university for kinesiology. So the idea of hacking biology, the first thing you think is like, what are we injecting? I've seen people like get really cold and I've seen people inject their own stem cells. Like, if you look, that is what you will find, but we don't have to start there. So what I love to do is help entrepreneurs meet where they are with crossing into biohacking. So if you go, well, what is biohacking? Well, if you break it down, what it sounds like, it's hacking your own biology. It's essentially using ideas to not only change your external environment. So think the temperature of the room, think the lighting in your evening, but also your internal environment, what you eat, how you sleep, how you move, so that you can have more longevity, so that your brain can work better, and that you can feel more energized in your body. But the way I do biohacking is a little bit differently, because how I differentiate that from just like regular health habits is everything must be measured. Now, we're entrepreneurs here. We like return on investment. Like, we all like a little good ROI. Like, is what I'm doing creating clients? Is the ad I'm putting out performing? Like, we're looking at all of these things. This is what I like to do with our health. Meaning, if I put energy into something, am I going to be getting more energy out of it? That is what I want, so that we don't end up with this pile of health habits that we think we should be doing, feel completely overwhelmed, and tell ourselves, you know what, I'm just going to get my business to the next milestone, my first 5-figure month, my 6-figure year, whatever it is, then I'll work on my health. And we trap ourselves into this idea that we can't have our health and our business both be successful at the same time. So I use biohacking to be exceptionally efficient and be like, if I decide to start shifting my bedtime by half an hour, do I feel more well rested? If I extend my sleep, am I more productive the next day? And that's what makes biohacking so special for me.
I love it. We're talking data. That's one of my favorite things. Yeah, that and being intentional and Venn diagrams also too. But so in this case, data, yes, because, and this happens, oh my gosh, this is my productivity language because it happens so much with my clients where they're like, okay, I'm supposed to do this, or you use that word, you know that word? Okay. Everyone, did you hear it? It was the should word, right? It was like, that's a crazy word. It's like, but does it work is the question. And so you're talking about getting the data to say whether or not it does. Well, I'm in. Okay. So now, where do we go from here? Do we want to talk a bit about what brain fog really is or what's happening? And then how you go about assessing what's going on, and then what do we do next?
It's like my favorite topic after sleep is brain fog, because I would say 90% of us have brain fog, but most of us either don't know we have it or don't know what to do about it. Like brain fog isn't something you can just, go walk into your doctor's office and get diagnosed and they're like, well, here's a plan to help with your brain fog, right? Like, because what it is on a fundamental level is brain fog is a collection of symptoms, right? So think about this. Like, have you ever sat down at your computer and you go to write an email and then all of a sudden you're like, who am I writing this email to? Or you go upstairs and you can't remember what you went upstairs for. That these are examples of forgetfulness. Or you wake up and your brain just feels really thick. Like I've sat down before, and I know this experience when you go to write a newsletter or a post for social, and it literally feels like the front of your head is thick and your brain is heavy and it's just not working properly. And I find that decisions feel really hard to make. Like you feel like you have to weigh your options and you're not quite sure if you're making the right decision. And you just have this low energy all day and underlying sense of fatigue. And you get those crashes that come, usually in the afternoon. And all you want to do is crash onto the couch, grab Netflix, but also be scrolling your phone at the same time. And, just when you're working, you're easily distracted, meaning if your phone goes off, you're gone. Amazon is also open, and Facebook and Instagram and this, and you're flipping between tabs and it feels like it takes you forever to get anything done, but you're multitasking. Why isn't this working? Why is my thinking so cloudy? That's brain fog. But the craziest thing about brain fog, we look around at our friends and our peers and other entrepreneurs, and it just seems so normal. Yeah, we're tired. Yeah, we've got a lot to do. Yeah, I didn't sleep well last night. I haven't had time to cook a whole food meal. What is exercise? What are you talking about? Like all of these things are so normal in the entrepreneurial community that we never stop to question, like, is this normal for me? And do I want this to continue being normal? Why aren't we questioning what is happening in our brains? And so that is what I do is I help unwind that feeling and get you back that clarity, because my favorite part of working with any client or anybody who even dives into this world of biohacking is we get to that point where we start waking up and we're clear and we're energized and it's sustainable and it's feeling good and we like this. And then we have a day where we go back to 6 hours of sleep, or our food gets a little, a little out of control. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, did I always feel like this? And you just weren't able to perceive how foggy your brain was until you know what it's like to feel clear. That's my best way to describe brain fog.
Wow. I mean, that pretty much did it. I think there are a whole bunch of us who are like, okay, so Tanessa, I kind of feel called out and also seen, and I'm confused, but it's
You
probably
might
the
have brain fog if you're
fog.
confused.
Exactly. But it is so, so true. And I just recently had an issue where I was like, wait a minute, what's going on with the fog? And honestly, it's like, to me, it's like walking through sand as opposed to being on like one of those really cool new cushy tracks that's comfortable with a great pair of sneakers. And it's like the, you know what I mean?
Like thinking through sand.
Yeah. Ugh. And yeah. Get sand in really awkward places, prefrontal cortex. Yeah. So, and decision making, and we've talked about that. There's so many different ways that we can impact and support decision making, but here's another one to look at when it feels like it's difficult to make decisions. I love that you mentioned that one, because I definitely think that whole, I can't think straight kind of thing, or I've forgotten why I walked in the room. I'll tell you, you talk to people and that's something we all bond over in a way, right? But like you said, how about we question that? Does it have to be that way? Woohoo. That is exactly why we're having this conversation on this podcast, because it's time to question, is this the way that we need to live, or is there a better way? So tell us, what do we do?
Yeah. Well, okay. First, we have to figure out what the heck's causing it, right? So, at the root cause, brain fog is caused by inflammation that's happening somewhere in our body. So, when we think inflammation, the best way to think about it is like, when you like sprain your ankle, for example, it gets swollen, it gets red, a lot of fluid accumulates. Maybe there's an immune system response to it. Like, it's a noticeable side effect that happens, right? Well, this happens in our brain, which we need to know what is causing this, right? And time again, when I've looked at the data with my clients, when I've read the research, and also when I've experimented on myself, it comes down to one of three areas. It usually comes from either not getting enough high quality sleep, poor nutrition in which your glucose is out of control, and we can go into that. And lastly, unmanaged, unchecked stress. And I don't necessarily mean like, oh my gosh, I'm in worry about something and I'm ruminating on something. I mean like the stress our body perceives from low level worry, nutritional stress, chemical stress, emotional stress, mental stress, relationship stress. All of these things are setting off high levels of cortisol and an immune response and is causing our brain to not think clearly.
I love that you mentioned the specifics of the stress because I do address that quite a bit on the podcast and in my coaching. And a lot of times we talk about, the internal and external stressors in terms of like the things that trigger you and set you off. And it does involve worry, it does involve focus, it does involve, it could be phobias, it could be all these different things. But the one place that I don't exactly go because this is not my expertise is when you think about the stressors of exercise or nutrition and I've read about this from time to time looking at different ways that I could be eating and the idea of I'm going to lower my carbs maybe because I do want to keep my glucose in check, but then that's also technically a stressor on the body, right? And so kind of there's this constant back and forth. I would love to touch upon each of these a little bit on sleep and then into nutrition and the stress if you would. So tell us a bit more, please.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with sleep. So this is one of those things where I can't tell you how many people tell me I'm sleeping fine. I'm getting my 7 to 8 hours of night. It's fine. And in fact, I mean, if we look, they're like, I'm going to bed at, I'm just going to use some times here, 11, wake up at 7. That's my 8 hours, right? And a lot of the times we think, okay, well, why would I need to worry about that? And I used to be guilty of that. I used to flip through other people's Instagram stories, scroll by those articles, thinking that I was one of those people that was getting enough sleep. But back in, when was it? When I was pregnant with my first daughter, I got myself a Fitbit because I was like, I am going to be a very fit pregnant lady and I'm going to take all the steps every day. Nobody told me about the pelvic pain that was going to come, and that never happened. But the Fitbit that I had bought gave me an insight into sleep. And the first thing I learned was that I'm not getting nearly as much sleep as I think. So there's a concept called sleep opportunity that we don't know about. So when we go to bed and we wake up, we are awake during certain points of those evenings. So think about this. It takes time for your brain to fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
You toss and turn at night. There's wake ups you're not aware of. There are the wake ups you're aware of, like when your brain decides to go off on your to-do list at 4 a.m, or you have to wake up to pee again. And when your brain is waking up in the morning, and when I look at this data, because I've worked with a ton of clients and I collect all their data, I put it in spreadsheets, I color code it, and I analyze it because I want to be able to actually tell what's working. And the average client is spending between an hour and an hour, I'd say about 15 minutes awake every night. Now, if you take your supposed 8 hours and you subtract off an hour and 15 minutes awake, your brain is now not getting enough restorative sleep to perform the next day and have adequate cognition, right? So
Yep.
sleep opportunity is how much time you give yourself to sleep. And then there's the sleep time is how much time your brain actually spends asleep. Now, if you're just the average person who spends an hour awake because your evening routine isn't optimized, or your bedroom isn't optimized, or perhaps you're highly stressed, or your food is affecting it, all of the different things. If you are that average person, then you need to be allowing for that amount of time on top of the time you give yourself to sleep. If you want 8 hours of sleep, you need to be in bed for 9 hours. That was the first one for me where I totally thought my sleep was fine and I was undersleeping the whole time.
And that's a great tip. That's one thing that even while we're still getting on board with getting the data and figuring out what we're doing, if we even sense that there's something going on or we know that it takes us longer and that there are many of these factors going on, giving ourselves that extra time is a great place to start.
Yeah, definitely. So then when we look from there, once you have enough sleep, then we have to look at, well, what is going on during our sleep? Most people don't know that the brain passes through certain phases during the night. And these phases directly correlate to our ability to perform as an entrepreneur. So in our sleep, we go through two different phases. One is called deep sleep and one is called REM sleep. The reason I want you to care about these is because I want you to know how missing out on them affects your business. Deep sleep specifically is restorative. It is when your brain clears up all the debris from the day and allows you to, sync things to long-term memory. It allows you to refresh and recover. This is what allows your brain to stay refreshed and sharp long-term. Think of things like preventing dementia, think of things like preventing Alzheimer's, and also think of things like just feeling refreshed and restored when you wake up, right? Like being able to remember things. So deep sleep mostly happens in the early part of the night, although we do get some later on. Now, at the end of the night, mostly think hours like 3, 4, 5, 6 a.m., we get the majority of our dream sleep, which is called REM sleep. Now, when I talk to my clients, I call this entrepreneurial gold because what happens to our brain during REM sleep makes us amazing entrepreneurs. So here's an example. REM sleep has been shown in studies to foster creative thinking and being able to solve out of the box problems. What is our job as an entrepreneur? Our job is to solve problems, and our businesses will scale to the size of the problem we can solve. And the creativity and the way we approach it and the unique way our ideas create our thought work and our work we put out in the world. So if you are finding that, like, I just don't have new ideas, I feel like I'm repeating what I saw on Instagram for my own content, I can't figure out why this client's not quite getting results, maybe you're missing REM sleep. And it gets better than this. Getting adequate REM sleep boosts your ability to read facial expressions and body gestures. Now, I want you to think of this. If you have a team, if you work with clients, if you are on an interview, your job is to be able to read their facial expressions and body gestures so that you can pick up where to take the conversation when you're pushing too hard, where there's somewhere to explore. Like my job as a coach is not only just to help you fix your sleep and all of that stuff. My job is to make sure you're supported and that you get what you need. So if I'm able to tune in to a subtle shift in your body gestures where I see you retreat, I'm going to ask about it because I want you to get the best coaching experience. So my ability to read you makes me a better coach. I'm not giving that up. And so I protect my REM sleep. And the very last thing that REM does, it's so good. Like I really mean it when I say entrepreneurial goal. REM sleep also helps you manage your emotions. So let's say you had one of those days and then all of a sudden someone likes to come on your Instagram and tell you your reel you just put up is cringe, which has happened to me in the last couple of weeks.
Whatever.
I mean, I'm not even gonna lie, they are cringe sometimes, but I also find them hilarious.
What's the
But
point of them? Hello, but okay. Yes, exactly.
anyways, so what studies have shown is that when someone does not achieve enough quality dream sleep in their night, they are more likely to react negatively. So I would be more likely to go to what's wrong with me, rewatch the video, I'm hurt, respond angrily in a way that doesn't feel authentic and in integrity with who I want to be in my business. I want to be in control. I want to be always thinking long term. But if my emotional brain is leading the show, I am way more likely to respond in that manner. And that's not how I want to represent myself. If I get critical feedback from a client, which I always welcome, because I want those experiences to be great, but I also want to be able to handle them well. And I'm not able to do that if I'm not getting enough REM sleep.
Right. You want to be able to discern what they're saying too, because there's a big difference between, okay, this is something I need from you as a coach, and this is something that we haven't done. And I'd like to see more of this from you or whatever. That's one type of feedback. Another is someone being like, oh, that Instagram reel was cringe. Yeah, whatever, dude. But, and it's being able to discern that and not just immediately have that reactivity. So yeah, that is powerful. But man, oh man, take me back to this whole creative thinking. I was a huge fan of the restorative aspects of sleep, especially because for years I cared for my mom who had Alzheimer's. So this is a big topic for me to be paying attention to. And so understanding that clearing out, flushing out the brain is a huge component, because then you're flushing out the buildup of plaque and other things like that, is my understanding, not a doctor. But it was like, okay, that alone is worth its weight in gold. But now this REM sleep side of it, mind blown.
I know, right? But so here's why you need to know that. Because I mean, great, but what the heck do I do about it? Like, how do I know if I'm not getting enough? Well, first of all, getting some type of way to track your sleep, whether that be an Oura ring or a Fitbit, is one of the simplest investments you can make in your health. It's like I said, it's like trying to go shopping with never having looked at your online banking. And every time you swipe, you're like, is this going to go through? I don't know.
Fingers crossed.
I know, right? So the reason that I bring this all up is when we go to sleep and wake up, the more consistent we are with that, the more we can protect both ends of these sleep. So you remember how I said that deep sleep happens mostly earlier in the night, although we do get some in the end.
Right.
And dreaming happens mostly in the early morning, although we do get some earlier on. Now, here I want you to think about this. Let's pretend during the week you went to bed at 11 and you woke up at 7 and you're pretty consistent, but the weekend comes, right? That's your time where you don't have to go to sleep. You just get to do whatever you want. So you go to sleep at 1 a.m. in the morning. Now, we think it's okay, I'll just catch up in the morning. But when you move your sleep by 2 hours, it affects something called your circadian rhythm, which just think internal body clock. Now, if most of your deep sleep is happening in the early part of the night, you're not just missing 2 hours sleep, but you could be sacrificing 50 to 60% of your deep sleep. Same as if you get up really early, you're sacrificing your REM sleep. So it's not just about, oh, I'm just going to shift my sleep schedule. Because what that actually creates is something called social jet lag, meaning your social schedule is creating the experience of jet lag. And there have been certain research studies that have said for every hour you shift your sleep by on the weekend, it takes 24 hours to recover full cognitive abilities. So if you stay up late, 2 hours late on the weekend, it'll take you Monday, Tuesday to recover full cognition. Now, I want you to think about this. How often do you start Monday feeling all foggy, tired? It's Monday. By Wednesday, you hit your groove. Thursday, Friday, it's the weekend again, we do this all over again. So it's literally like hopping on a plane and flying from coast to coast, Friday to Sunday, experiencing physical jet lag and wondering why our brains don't work properly. We're not only literally shifting our physiology, but we're missing out on those essential components of sleep. We're blurring our cognitive ability. And then we wonder why, like, I can't write this email this morning. What's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. Your body clock is just very off.
Well, all I know is that I am definitely going to be getting up earlier this Saturday. So, but really, when you think about the impact, and here's the other thing too, that I just want to say as a caveat is that it's about making informed decisions. Now, I was lucky enough recently to go out to a concert with my family, and it was the first concert that my kids have ever gotten to see live music. It was late. We were up late. But guess what? Totally worth it. But it's being literally cognizant of the impact that it's going to have and what to do, getting to bed as soon as you can, and then getting up, resuming your routine, and then maybe understanding and building in that time that you're going to take. And something that I have done naturally, just from a productivity standpoint, it just always made sense to me is that I had things like that going on over the course of the weekend. I would block very little on a Monday. I would keep that a very light day. I have that ability. I mean, not everyone does when they have jobs and bosses and things, but I'm my own boss. And sometimes I'm kind of nice to me. And so I would do that. And it has made a huge difference that I can kind of ease into the day and keep recovering.
Yeah, I love what you said too about real life happening and not beating ourselves up for that. Because the nice thing about all this is once you are aware and you know, you can make intentional choices. Like,
Yes.
This is an experience that I'm having with my family. This is worth staying up. 4 or 5 episodes of Netflix in, maybe you get to make a different decision, but maybe you don't. The nice thing is when you're aware, you get to ask yourself, like, is this a good trade-off for how I might feel the rest of the week? Because honestly, we all do stay up late sometimes. But I think it's also, like you said, allowing for, am I going to allow myself to make up that sleep debt? Meaning, is there space over the next couple of days to not only just get back to enough sleep, but to oversleep to catch up and fill that sleep debt? And then I love what you said about leaving space to allow your brain to be not quite as sharp. There's nothing wrong with it. But I said, like you said, it's intentional choices and clearing some space. And then if you feel productive, great, add some more stuff on.
I definitely want to touch upon a little bit of the nutrition and a little bit of the stress, but we couldn't help but talk a little more sleep than I had intended. And I have to ask one more question because you just touched upon it. And it's the idea of making up sleep, because I've heard things in both directions. You can't make it up. And then some people are like, but I try anyhow. And sometimes I know that I just need more sleep. Obviously, we need more sleep when we're sick. What's the deal, Tanessa?
Yeah. So we actually do carry sleep debt. And what that means is, so let's say you have realized through self experimentation, maybe a little bit of tracking, maybe some subjective tracking, that I feel really good when I get about 7 hours and 50 minutes per night of sleep. That's mine. Right. And I know that if I wake up one day and I only got 7 hours of sleep, I have now created a 50-minute sleep debt. So the next night, if I get 7 hours and 50 minutes, you carry that sleep debt. So we actually need to oversleep, and it can be over a couple of days, and it can be over a couple of naps, which is the beautiful thing. So we do love our naps, but you can bake up that sleep debt over time. Now, what is really interesting is it does depend a little bit on what type of sleep you miss. So there is something a bit called sleep rebound, which means that when we are catching up on our sleep, it'll catch up on deep sleep first and fill up that tank before we start catching up on the good stuff, which is, I mean, it's all good stuff, but the entrepreneurial gold, the dreaming sleep that I was talking about. So yes, we do carry a sleep debt. And that is often why so many of us are unintentionally sleep deprived. Remember how I told you sleep opportunity versus sleep time? We
Hmm.
get to the weekend, we sleep 10 hours. It's not because you're lazy. I promise. It's not because you have the time. It's literally your brain being like, I need to catch up
Shut her
on my
down.
sleep. And that's what ends up happening. But I mean, so to your point, yes, there is a catch-up process that goes on.
Well, there you go. And that is really encouraging because originally, when you'd hear people say, "Oh, you can't make it up," and what I'm like, well, I got to try something. So I think instinctively we just know. All right, that was awesome. And that was worth the price of admission right there. But if you could touch upon a little bit the nutrition part and any of the like the other stressors that we're not thinking of besides the things that we've covered here, like, worry and deadlines and just things that are they're going on in the world. But there's other elements to that, like the physical ones and stuff. I'd love to know.
Yeah, let's dig into the nutrition part first, then we'll visit that one. So, as far as food goes, we're often taught that all it does is it impacts either the way we look or the way we fit our pants. And there are foods that should be healthy, and there are foods that we should not eat. And all of these things come into us messages. This is the best way to eat. This is the best way to eat. But in truth, is that everyone does react differently to different foods. However, there are underlying principles which will affect our brain performance. And this is not necessarily talking about a way of eating for, let's just say, if you wanted to get really fit or something like that. Like, we're talking about brain performance here. So when we talk about that, what we need to look at is something called your blood glucose levels. When we eat food, it breaks down in our digestive system, it goes into the bloodstream, and it turns into nutrients that we can either use for energy or to build muscles, right? So, particularly when we eat carbohydrate meals, its breakdown product is called glucose. That enters the blood. Now, when we are looking at how the heck does that relate to brain fog is a cause by inflammation, right? So when we have inflammation in our body, what is happening is that we are seeing what's called high glucose variability, meaning that we see a lot of glucose in the blood sometimes and not a lot in other times. And it kind of creates this roller coaster effect. So you eat a meal and it causes a big spike in blood sugar, which is followed by a big crash. So think of rolling hills. Well, rolling hills not only creates the inflammation that causes brain fog, but it also affects a hormone called insulin, which at high levels as well can cause brain fog and, inflammation and stuff like that. So what we want to think is when we are choosing our meals, we want to have food in our nutrition, in our plans that create a stable blood sugar level. So now you're like, what the heck does that mean on my plate? Because these are very sciencey words. So what that means is we have to understand that certain foods cause bigger blood sugar rises than other foods. So here is a good way to think about it. When you eat foods that contain fats, there is very minimal change to your blood sugar. So think of things like olive oil, think about the fats in salmon and stuff like that. Very minimal change. Then you have proteins. There is a mild to moderate response, mostly if you're overeating protein.
Mm.
But in general, if your plate has protein and fat on it, there's not going to be much effect on your blood sugar. Then we enter the category of carbohydrates. Now, I do want to preface this by saying we're not here to demonize carbohydrates. They're not bad, and they have a wonderful place in every nutrition plan. but used accordingly and smartly because there's different types of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates range from everything from leafy greens to fruit to grains and beans and rice to flour and sugar. So if you're looking at, well, how do those all individually affect my blood sugar? Vegetables in general will affect it minimally, especially your leafy greens. They have so much wonderful fiber in there that it does blunt the response of the blood sugar. Beyond that, we start looking at things like fruits and grains such as rice and beans. Those are predominantly carbohydrate. They do cause more of a spike than, say, vegetables, but they also have the fiber in there to kind of mitigate it a little bit. Now, on the other end of things, you have your processed sugar and flour. Now, think back to like chemistry grade 8 level here. When you take something and you grind it down into a powder, it increases the surface area. So that will increase the absorption rate. This is why we get such wild blood sugar swings with sugar and flour because they are processed, right? The simplest way to break this down, look at your plate and ask yourself, did the food that is on my plate come from the ground at one point or have a mother? That is how you tell if it is a whole food, because in general, whole foods will spike your blood sugar a lot less. So we're looking at our plate and asking ourselves that question. And in general, we want to eat whole foods as often as possible because it keeps that steady blood sugar level. So that not only keeps our brain from becoming foggy, but it keeps our energy stable throughout the day. So we're not riding that roller coaster of like the energy rush of eating a big pasta meal followed by a crash.
And not only that, if I remember correctly, doesn't that the spikes that we have, again, when we're playing with a glucose spike and then, we have more insulin rushing to deal with that, doesn't that affect how we're sleeping at night as well?
Oh, 100%. There's such a correlation between what you eat before bed and when you sleep, and specifically when you eat before bed. So I want you to think about this. Let's say you got to the end of a workday, it was a busy day. You realize you open the fridge, you don't have enough groceries. There's nothing really healthy to eat. So you're just like, it's fine. I'm going to throw some pasta in a pot, or I'm going to grab a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios, which is one of my favorites. But it's like, you got about 2 hours before bed because everything wrapped up really late. So you're eating this meal. And when you eat a big meal, regardless of what's in it, too close to bedtime, what happens is your body temperature goes up, you start digesting, your heart rate goes up. All of these things need to happen for you to digest this meal, and it prevents you from entering that restorative deep sleep. And so it will not only disrupt the quality of your sleep, but because your body is still working and your heart rate does not get to drop, you will likely experience far more wake ups. Now, that's with the timing. So if you're looking at like, well, how can I protect my sleep with food? I would say eat at least 3 hours before you plan to be in bed. So that's part one. Then we look at the composition. So if you eat a meal that has a very high level of carbohydrates, or even just a moderate, everyone's different, has different sensitivities to it. But if you eat a high carbohydrate meal before bed, it does spike your blood sugar. But the hormone that's responsible for lowering your blood sugar doesn't work as well at night. So all that blood sugar stays high. That sustained higher blood sugar causes wake ups. It also causes cortisol to spike. So if you are always waking up at night, or you're frequently waking up and your brain just lights up and you feel like, how am I going to get back to sleep? There is a very good chance that there may be too much carbohydrate in your dinner, and you may be eating too close to bed. So let's just keep it simple. Eat a minimum of 3 hours before bed, and have your dinner consist of leafy greens and vegetables, fats and proteins. Think things like salmon and Brussels sprouts, or think things like a big salad and maybe some chicken or tofu or something like that. But you're wanting to keep that big serving of pasta or the Honey Nut Cheerios or the rice earlier in the day so that they affect your sleep less.
See, I like that kind of advice that involves it doesn't mean you can't have it, but think about when. And also, again, making an informed decision, because when you have it and what you have, and also, again, paying attention to your body and how you react. And I know that I am more sensitive to carbohydrate and spikes. So I pay attention to that as well. But again, using that understanding and that data to make the informed choices.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Love it. All right. How about we wrap things up and maybe just touch upon that stress part a little bit? Just some things for us to keep in mind.
Yeah. The best analogy I ever heard to describe stress was by Andrew Huberman. If you're into all of this, like super nerdy, how does my brain work with stuff, but like at a university professor level,
Hmm.
his podcast is wonderful. But he said this analogy. He was guesting on a podcast and he said, I want you to picture one of those old school teeter totters that we see at the playgrounds. And they have the fulcrum point in the middle. And on one side, you have your sympathetic nervous system. Think fight or flight, adrenaline, cortisol, that panicky kind of, oh my gosh, like you know what I'm talking about. Your heart's going, the adrenaline's rushing. That's on one end of the teeter totter. On the other end, you have your parasympathetic nervous system. Rest, digest, relax. Those are the two ends. Now, optimally, that teeter totter is able to fluctuate from side to side and picture you're standing in the middle of that fulcrum of the teeter totter surfing. You want to be able to ebb and flow onto each side because we need that fight or flight. That is what is making us focused and alert and vigilant. And heck, I want to be focused and alert when I'm writing my newsletter. I don't want to feel like a nap. So we need some of that, but we also need to be able to dip into that relaxation, right? But here is what happens when there is a lot of inflammation in the body, specifically due to lack of sleep. That teeter totter jams all the way down. Like you remember when your friends used to jump off and your butt used to hit the ground? That's what's happening to your fight or flight system, and you're not able to get out. And this is what is happening is we lose that ability to flow in and out, right? So how the heck do we fix this then if we find that? Well, first of all, we're looking at how can we lower inflammation? We talked about sleep, we talked about food. Now we actually need to talk about creating space for nothing, which I find as entrepreneurs, we have a very hard time doing. So when I like to look at this, I like to explain it in terms of how our brain works. So right now, when you're listening to this interview right now, or you're, working with a client, your brain waves are in a state called beta. They are focused and alert, everything we want to be. And sometimes during work, we go into high beta, which is a little bit of anxiety and worry, but we like to stay in beta while we're working for the most part. Now, there is an alternate stage that we need to be spending more time in, and it's the next stage down called alpha. And your brain waves are slower in alpha. Now, I don't want you to think of alpha as like, what activities am I doing differently, but how am I experiencing those activities? It is more that sense of relaxation, of presence, of feeling that moment that you are feeling when your brain is in alpha. Because sometimes I'll have clients say, like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go read a book and that's what's going to make me feel relaxed. Yeah, but then they also go and pick up a business book and they have their highlighters and their sticky notes and they're creating content on the side. And this will be a good Instagram post. That is beta activity with reading. Now, alternatively, for me, when I go before bed, I like to read a fiction book. I like my brain to disengage. I like it to kind of be a fantasy world. I'm really focusing on one thing. I'm present. I fall asleep with my book on my hand a lot of the times. That is alpha wave activity. So, what we need to start doing is looking at what activities create that contrast for me, and is there room for them? Because I'm reading a fantastic book right now by Cal Newport called Digital Minimalism right now.
I'm a big fan of Cal. Deep work originally in this idea. He is like a pro at going into the alpha state, going into the focus state, removing distractions. It's
Yes.
absolutely a huge part of this, and you can't reach the man by email or anything else. It's not going to happen, and he's walking his own talk for sure.
Oh, he's amazing. He said this thing in the book that I was like, huh. He talks about this concept called solitude. And I've never heard it quite phrased this way before. But he said, solitude is the concept of spending time each day without the input of other minds. Meaning that podcast you're listening to in the shower, that conversation you're having with your partner, the business work you're doing, all of that, you're having input from social media, from TV. Everything is filtering into your mind at the point where we don't actually have any time for our own creative thinking. And so solitude, I never heard it put this way before reading this, although it was something I'd always circled around and taught very much. This idea that we need space without input from other minds to let us process our emotions, to let us think about things, make decisions, have that time where that teeter-totter dips back into parasympathetic state, goes into that alpha wave state. And when I heard that it was solitude, because for me, I always thought solitude meant you go in a cabin by yourself, but it really just means the absence of other thoughts except your own. And creating small spaces for that throughout your day will do such a wonderful thing in lowering the stress your body experiences, which lowers inflammation and helps eliminate brain fog.
And you've just described what I do as a holistic productivity coach, because that is the key. And I had a great conversation with Krista Bevan about this, about processing the stress from the body physically. And we talked about a simple thing like when you're driving to the store 10, 15, 20 minutes away, and you take that opportunity to not listen to the radio, to not listen to a podcast. I love when you listen to this podcast, but sometimes you have to turn it off, turn everything else off, and let your mind do its thing. I love that. Okay. We are ready for a wrap up. I think you have covered these topics beautifully. So now, quickly, where can we find you online? And then we're going to go into a rapid wrap up.
Yeah. So I have a podcast called Becoming Limitless, and it is the place to go if you're an entrepreneur who wants to biohack how your brain works and your health works. Every episode is a deep dive on one concept that you could take action on and start seeing results immediately. But beyond that, I'm on Instagram all the time. I'm always having conversations on all of this brain fog and feeling well rested stuff. So you can definitely find me over there. Ask me all the questions and I can help you out if you're just starting on this journey and you're like, this is exciting. There's so much. Where do I start?
Yeah, I love it. And I will have all those links in the show notes. Okay, now it is time to fill in the blank for me. A song that lifts my spirits, makes me dance is?
Oh, Feel Good by Elenium.
Okay, I like that title. All right, how about a quote or mantra that inspires me, that I share?
Yeah, it was a piece of business coaching I got 4 years ago. When you don't think you're the problem, you don't think you're the solution. So when you always think that the problems are created by something outside of you, you will think the solutions are outside of you, and it will make you feel helpless. So when we recognize that our brains are often in our thinking is causing what we are experiencing, we now know that we have the power to change that with our thinking too.
Okay, that's deep and that's good. All right. And how about a resource like a book or an app, in addition to the ones you've already mentioned, which I'll have in the show notes, that's made my life better?
Oh, Brain FM.
Ooh.
If you love that whole concept of like alpha brainwaves and beta brainwaves, think of this app like a remote control where you could change the channel on your brainwave frequency. It's a fascinating app where they use automated notebots in there to actually sync your brainwaves to the frequency that you can't hear in the music. Like literally, this is when I go and I write my newsletter sequences and there's like flame shooting out of my brains when I put on the focus track. It is excellent for that. And especially if you're the type of brain that you're like, I haven't felt relaxed or present in so long, or solitude, I need help with that. Tune into the relax track. Like think of remote control for your brain. It's excellent.
Love it. Okay. And last but not least, what are you grateful for today, Tanessa?
I'm grateful for the fact that I can still do most of the exercise during my pregnancy right now, because I'm 29 weeks at the time we record this, and I'm slowly losing little bits of it every week. But we had a good workout this morning and I was just feeling grateful that I can still move my body right now.
And feeling good. And I'm definitely grateful for that for you. And I'm definitely grateful for you. And I want to thank you, Tanessa, for shining your light in this world and for sharing it with us today.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me and letting me share that.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.